Hi, I'm Russell Claus and I'm the Director of Planning for Oklahoma City. Today we're going to talk about Bricktown, and specifically we're going to talk about a strategic plan that we have recently developed to look at how to address the future for Bricktown. Today I have with me AJ Kirkpatrick, who is a planner on my staff, and AJ was responsible for developing this plan, and we're going to talk about the process for the plan, what it contains, and what we expect to happen after the plan is adopted. So AJ, welcome this morning.
Thank you.
You spent a lot of time on this. Can you tell us how this plan got started?
Yeah, we started with the Bricktown parking study in 2008, and during that time we realized we wanted to do something a little more comprehensive in conjunction with that. And then around 2010, we started to work on renewing the Downtown Business Improvement District for another 10 years, and that started a lot of good conversations with property owners about what they want to do with the district. And then finally, we started to realize that we were coming up on the 20th anniversary of the 1992 Bricktown plan. So it had been quite a while since we had done anything with it. So we also wanted to just take a moment and talk to the property owners about what they wanted to do with their property and what the next 5 or 10 years might hold for Bricktown.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, Bricktown has been doing well, but nothing stays the same. The world keeps changing, and it's important that districts like Bricktown are able to evolve to continue to meet those emerging needs, and that was a primary purpose of the plan. Whenever we do a plan, we make a significant effort to try and involve as many people as possible who are affected by the plan, who have an interest in what the outcomes are or what the content of it is, and that's an essential part of the planning process. How did we go about that in this particular instance?
Well, we made sure to talk to the 9 largest property owners. That was our first big step, and we learned a lot of great information from that. And once we had gotten our first idea of what we wanted the plan to be, we took it back and presented to lots of standing bodies throughout downtown, the Bricktown Association, the Downtown Business Improvement District Advisory Board, and the Bricktown Urban Design Committee. And so throughout all of that, we were getting good feedback for the entire process.
What was the feedback from the property owners, and how has that been incorporated into the plan?
Well, it was really invaluable to sit down and talk to them. You don't always get an opportunity to sit down and to hear the same thing, to ask the same questions of all the property owners and to hear the varying responses. So what we did is we set up an interview panel of myself, somebody from the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber, Downtown Oklahoma City, the executive director of the Bricktown Association, and also the staff for the Bricktown Urban Design Committee. And we interviewed the 9, and we really focused, I think what we brought back from that is that we heard a lot about the opportunities and challenges. So some of the opportunities that we heard, everybody was very excited at the time about the new convention center. I think most of the property owners really see how important visitors and conventioneers are to the future of the district, and I think you're seeing that in the growth of the hotels right now. We also heard a lot about some of the transportation enhancements that are about to happen. That when you think about the MAPS 3 streetcar, the fact that the Santa Fe train station could soon become a multimodal hub where you're getting train commuters, and eventually the streetcar may be crossing, and you're going to have people that are able to jump off that train and jump onto the streetcar. That's clearly bodes well for the future of Bricktown. In terms of, and one other positive I think we heard is that I think Bricktown is starting to really be viewed as one of the top entertainment districts in the region, and that's really gotten a lot of people interested, and continues to get new people interested in the district. In terms of some of the challenges, we did hear some feedback that for some reason Bricktown seems to attract people that don't have a lot of development experience. So there is a bit of a knowledge gap. That's particularly dangerous when you think that Bricktown does have some of the most difficult buildings to have to rehab in the city. You've got buildings that in some cases have been empty for 40 years. They're going to have some potential contamination issues if there's any oil or petroleum history on the building. They may have some asbestos. And there's a steep learning curve for that. And so when you've got people coming in that don't have a lot of development experience, you're giving yourself a double whammy there. So one of the things we focus in the plan on is that we need to work with property owners, work on issues of collaboration, issues of development experience. Some other things that came up. We're 10 years since we're more than a decade since the canal was finished. There's still some frustration of those that took the early leap to invest on the canal, that we still have pretty large portions of the canal that are undeveloped. In addition to that, we also have lots of upper stories that are undeveloped. And I think most visitors to Bricktown don't realize how many of those upper floors are empty right now. And they'd like to see some other people make some investment and start to really see some of the active uses that you see when you look at pictures of the San Antonio Canal or when you go down to visit it. And then finally, I think there's some concern about the surface parking. Everybody loves having parking in Bricktown. That's always one of the most talked about topics in Bricktown. But there is some concern that those surface lots maybe aren't the prettiest and that they take away from the visitor's experience. And if there's something we can do to go back and try to improve the appearance of those surface parking lots and any new surface parking lots that we are to add to the district.
I'll get back to the parking issue in a minute, but talking about the sort of delayed development, what we expected to see more in response to the canal. That was a significant public investment, and I would be fair to say that there's been an amount of speculation on property there that it perhaps hindered redevelopment. There's probably not the same reason, though, for redevelopment of the upper floors. I believe, and you believe, that those would work immediately if those were developed. And it's important to point that out, that for the sort of future of Bricktown, that we're going to have to attack those gaps in the development plan for Bricktown. I mean, things are going very well. I mean, we've seen several hotels. We've got other prospects that are coming. It's all doing generally well, but I think to optimize the potential for Bricktown to really make it a stellar entertainment district, not just for Oklahoma City and the local region, but to be recognized in a national sense as to what we're doing, then those are things that we need to take on. And I know in your conversations you also talk to the bankers, because making this happen depends on financing, and with the recent changes in finance law and the recession, that's probably created a little bit of uncertainty about moving forward with it. Oklahoma City has been more sheltered than others, but in those conversations with bankers, can you tell us a little more about how they perceive Bricktown in terms of the future?
Yeah, that's actually another important part of the outreach we did. When we finished up with the initial 9 interviews with the largest property owners, we got a lot of feedback from the property owners that they wanted us to also talk to the bankers, especially those that weren't from Oklahoma City. They characterized our banking community as being very conservative, some of the more conservative ones that they've ever dealt with, and they encouraged us to go talk to the bankers about if there was some sort of disconnect that was occurring. And I think in talking to the bankers, I realized that the bankers' priorities for Bricktown really were different than some of the property owners. I think a lot of the property owners are attracted to Bricktown because it's an entertainment district, and they're interested in doing restaurants and bars and nightclubs, and maybe some retail. And bankers really feel like those sort of projects should be able to stand on their own or through investor equity. So bankers are actually more interested, I think, in some of the upper floor uses that we'd like to see. So they'd like to see more residential and more office space, and that's important for the future of this district, because it really needs to start. I believe it needs to start to transition from being a single-use entertainment district to something that's more diverse, and needs to have more residents and office workers that are able to sustain the district through the entire week. Before the Thunder, before the NBA came to town, it really was a boom and bust sort of district. They made all their money on the weekends, and then really starved throughout the week. And then you would occasionally have something where there would be some major weather event and people wouldn't come out for that weekend, and then they're really behind the 8 ball in terms of making money. So what we really tried to do is we tried to use this plan as an opportunity to talk about let's really diversify your land uses. Let's use some of these upper floors, and those are the things that are going to be able to sustain your restaurants and those other entertainment uses throughout the week, so that you really can make a lot of money on the weekends.
It's really important to stress that that mix of uses is really going to be vital to the stability of Bricktown over time, and that speculation I was talking about before was related to the income that you get off entertainment businesses. And that is keeping out, I think, some of those other mixed-use opportunities there, because it makes it too expensive to develop for residential or office or everything else if you're expecting that entertainment return. But there's only so much entertainment you can do without mixing those uses.
And that was two other things I guess I wanted to mention. Is that one is that we saw a lot of people buy in before the real estate bust at very high prices.
Yeah.
And now they're finding it difficult to build out to the level that they had expected. So they're a little upside down on some of those larger buildings. The other thing is they have very high expectations. If they are going to do residential, they want to go after the very high-end clientele. And I think most citizens may not realize that in Bricktown proper, the area south of the railroad track, there's actually only 35 residential units in Bricktown proper. Whereas across the railroad track in the area that's Steep Deuce and Maywood Park, you're having over 600 residential units that have been developed in the past 10 to 15 years. So there really is a disconnect there. Why is that happening? And I think a little of it is maybe unrealistic expectations about what market is interested in living in Bricktown. At the same time we were doing this, we were also doing the downtown housing study, and what it showed, and this was a real eye-opener for me, is that those people that may have more money, potentially retiring baby boomers, they actually would prefer to be more on the west side of downtown, closer to some of the cultural amenities like the museum. They're not going to be the group that wants to live above a bar, and they're not going to really prize those things. Who is going to prize those sort of activities in Bricktown are going to be younger people, and they may not have that same disposable income to buy a very high-end residential unit.
That's a little bit of a quandary for us, because that's the market, but that generally is not the income bracket that can afford to live there.
Exactly.
So somehow we're going to have to cover that gap.
Yeah.
I'm hearing the same thing in terms of where the baby boomers want to go.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit now about what the key recommendations of the plan are, and let's start with parking, because you mentioned that before. Always a concern. We have done studies in the past that indicate there is plenty of parking there. It's just a matter of how far people are willing to walk is one of that criteria. And then it's also access to the on-street parking. I think one of the things that I like about the plan is it points out that there are opportunities there to increase the potential for that. So talk to that and the other key recommendations.
Well, after all our analysis, including the interviews, we also went through and looked at all the target markets. We had seen that done in a couple other plans, and we thought it was really helpful. So we went through and talked about all the different, the downtown tourists, the downtown residents, the downtown employees. And then we also looked at it through a land use scope, and we looked at all the major land uses and what was realistic, and that was where the banker conversation was really helpful. So after all that analysis, we really came up with 5 main objectives, and those are: we asked them to consider diversifying their land uses. We wanted them to increase knowledge and understanding of emerging markets and trends. 3, we wanted them to improve facilities and services for tourists and visitors, and that was a big one. If Bricktown owners feel like the future of Bricktown is really going to be convention and visitor focused, then we asked, can we make this a better experience overall? Right now, there are many things that people that are coming to Bricktown are looking for. I've been stopped on the street and asked about, is there a certain type of restaurant here? And I'm sorry, that's not in Bricktown. Where do I buy OU or Oklahoma State apparel? Up until recently, there really wasn't that many options to even do that if you're a visitor. So really, if you're going to do it, let's go full board here, and let's really try to make this a great visitor and a visitor destination. 4, we wanted to promote collaboration and connections amongst Bricktown stakeholders. We realized that in a lot of cases, a kids museum was discussed by multiple people, and I think what we realized is that many of them did not even realize that they had the same ideas, and so we needed to work on some collaboration. And then the 5th thing is we wanted them to enhance the walkability of the district and to really focus on the aesthetics of and the appearance of the district parking. So, taking that note, On the Bricktown parking study, what the Bricktown parking study showed is that we actually have at that time they picked a night when we had an event at the Cox Center and an event we had at the old Ford Center, now the Chesapeake Arena, and we had plenty of parking for that sort of, and actually the haunted house was going on that night too, so we had plenty of parking for all three uses. So the district does have plenty of parking for a real peak event. The issue is that maybe it's not always where people expect it to be. And another issue, I think, in going through that is that we don't have a lot of on-street parking in Bricktown. If you look at all the curb space in Bricktown right now, less than 35% of that is parkable in the sense that you can pull up and maybe put money in a meter or something. And if you think about Reno, the area that separates Lower Bricktown from Bricktown proper, that there is no on-street parking there. And so that was something that the property owners asked us to take a look at. There's reasons right now why that is. Right now, Reno is a major east-west corridor through downtown, and we want to make sure that we have good traffic flow. Also, when we have major events downtown, we want to make sure that we can get people out quickly. But with the opening of the boulevard, we do have this new east-west connection that will increase the capacity and get people onto the interstates faster. So as that's occurring, we may want to go back and look at Reno. And we also have made some big pedestrian improvements in the Project 180 area. So is there a potential that we could try to narrow Reno a little bit and add more on-street parking? And then also Walnut Avenue, the area between the canal and the baseball stadium, that's a pretty wide street right now too. And we use a lot of that for queuing of taxis and for valet parking. Is there a chance that we could turn some of that over to the public for parking? I think that's been a lot of the frustration is there's a lot of parking, but it's on the edges. Yeah. And I think people would like to see some more, to see it spread out more evenly throughout the district. And then, like I said before, I think the aesthetics, the actual, the way that some of the surface parking lots we have right now look is another thing we need to address. If we are able to add more on-street spaces, I would argue that that weakens the parking market to some extent, and we aren't forcing people into these surface parking lots.
Well, we set some patterns that were convenient at the time, but those are going to need to change over time. So parking is a critical aspect of that. We've had employees parking at the meters in the past, and we're beginning to address all of these issues. But it's complex, and there are trade-offs there. But with everybody at least aware of what we're trying to accomplish together, the city and the private sector, that I think we can get there, because it's just really important to have an understanding of where you want to go if you're going to get there. We have now, we've taken this to the City Council, and the Council has adopted the plan. So what's next for ensuring that the plan is implemented?
Well, as I've mentioned, whenever you do something like the Business Improvement District renewal or this sort of interview process for Bricktown, it generates a lot of really great conversations with property owners about what they want to do. The planning department's taken an increased role in the Bricktown Association board. We've joined that, and we want to make sure that we are continuing to have conversations and figure out, of all the recommendations, we had 12 more specific recommendations in the plan. We need to sit down again now and talk to the property owners in the Bricktown Association and downtown Oklahoma City Incorporated staff and decide which of these are shared priorities that we might be able to find some funds to carry out. When we did the Business Improvement District, we tried to make it somewhat flexible so that we could address these sort of initiatives that come out of planning studies. That had been one of the frustrations over the past 10 years is, we have great ideas, but how do we carry them out? So that's the thing that we'll be focusing on in the next few months.
Well, it's been an exciting process, and we've still got a lot to do. Planning is a long-term process just in developing the ideas, but in the implementation, that's the hard part. We're taking a much more active approach on that than may have been the case for the city in the past, and it all depends on that relationship with the private sector, which we've worked hard to establish. AJ, as you've heard, has spent a lot of time working with the private sector, that we're all on the same page. That's the kind of thing that we like to do. with areas like Bricktown, and we're very confident, very optimistic about the future there. Now with everybody on the same page with a game plan to work forward, you can see the opportunities, and that's all good for Oklahoma City. I want to thank you today for listening to us. If you have any other questions, then you can go to our website, and you can always contact the planning department as well, and we'll be happy to work with you, whether it's an issue related to Bricktown or another part of the city. Thank you very much for your time today.